What if you hit rock bottom and stay there? People assume that once you hit rock bottom, you just magically level up, but unfortunately, that is not true. Today, I will talk about why hitting rock bottom isn't enough, what hitting rock bottom means on a physical as well as a metaphysical level, and how you can avoid being stuck at rock bottom. The first part is going to be why rock bottom isn't enough. When you think about rock bottom, you make the false assumption that there is such a thing as a final end point being defined as rock bottom. The reason you're doing that is that we're looking at reality through our physical eyes. And when we look at reality through our physical eyes, we're constrained by time and space. Every time you look at reality through the time and space lens, you live under the assumption, most of the time subconsciously, that you're moving on a linear timeline and that linear timeline is defined as moving from incompletion towards completion. And we all experience that to a certain extent when we set out several goals, such as having that career, being with that person, living in that city we wanted to move to. Once we acquire a certain amount of goods, that all of a sudden we will feel complete, just to find out that we never do. We're chasing the next thing. And that's because we're living in this illusion, moving from incompletion towards completion, which is because we're living from the mind of the ego, which thinks as life as moving from birth towards death, linearly in completion towards completion. We need to start looking at reality through the metaphysical lens. And when you look at reality through the metaphysical lens, there is no time-space constraint. But that also means that the past, the present, and the future collapse into an eternal now. And what that means in terms of points is that we're actually moving in a perpetual cycle of perfection towards perfection towards perfection. But in order to look at it that way, we have to understand that the rock bottom is just the other side of a flip coin, and then we need to look at the good and the bad as one. Second point is going to be that you can absolutely level down even from a point that you would define as rock bottom. And someone comes to mind from my own family, an older gentleman, who every time I see him seems to do worse than before. And people in my family kept telling me that, oh, you know what, he just hasn't hit rock bottom yet. He needs to hit rock bottom in order to level up. Reality outside needs to get worse for him to realize that he needs to get his act together. And just from a logical perspective, it just makes no sense. Because essentially what they're saying is that the reality around him, his life circumstances, have to get worse before he wakes up. Makes no sense. Essentially what you're saying is that if you look at it from your own perspective, you would be enslaving yourself to the external world to change in order for you to do something. What that also means is that you would be a chess piece to the external environment, because once external environment gets worse, then I will be waking up. As you can see from a logical level, that makes absolutely no sense. And because of that, people sometimes play this waiting game, and then they sink deeper and they sink deeper and they sink deeper because they live in this illusion that there is such a thing as a rock bottom end point. So, leads me to the third point, which is rock bottom is no guarantee to level up, but it is an opportunity to level up. In order for you to realize that it is an opportunity, you need to look at rock bottom from a different perspective. And you can imagine, or you might have even seen, that there's two people, person A, person B, that face similar rock bottom or similar hardship. They both lose their job. Maybe they both go through a divorce that is difficult. Maybe they lose their finances through bad investments. So they're both presented with a difficult situation. But when you look at it in hindsight, one person seems to crumble under that circumstance and just keeps leveling down, whereas the other person somehow magically is leveling up. And so I've asked myself over the last year and a half, 2 years, what makes the difference when someone is facing hardship but levels up versus levels down? And I will talk about that towards the end of this presentation. So just stay with me. Now, from a physical perspective, rock bottom is simply a very uncomfortable scenario, something we want to avoid because it comes with a certain load of emotional pain. It comes with anger, it comes with sadness, it comes with despair, it comes with chaos, it comes with not having a map on how to get out of it. So we're trying to avoid that. But from a divine perspective, rock bottom is simply a signal. And it is a signal because there are certain things that we are doing that we shouldn't be doing, that is creating this external reality which we perceive as rock bottom. So from that perspective, it essentially is the opportunity for us to dig internally and figure out what our inner state is that is causing this. And when I say inner state, I'm talking about state of consciousness, which is just another term of saying the sum total of your fundamental beliefs, fundamental values, your dispositional emotional state, your daily thoughts and ideas, your perception and interpretation of reality. And so rock bottom from that perspective, from the divine perspective, is simply a signal that you should be changing one or many of those in order to move to the desired reality that you envision. But as long as you don't do that, you're gonna be stuck in rock bottom. So how do we avoid being stuck in rock bottom, or possibly even avoid rock bottom and hardship altogether? The first one is we have to give up the idea that we're victims. I personally, in 18, 19, and 20, had several health issues. Overnight, I developed ringing in the ears, tinnitus. 3 sounds here, 2 sounds there. About a year after, I started getting panic attacks out of nowhere. I was in a relationship at that time, which later on, once I started digging, was not the right relationship for me to be in. So it was my body's way to cope with these panic attacks. And then a year after that, which was right around COVID time, I started getting these tingling sensations and these muscle twitches, brain zaps and brain fog. And literally they were all stacked after another, year after year after year. And they all felt to be chronic because they didn't go away. They were just there all the time. So I was like, man, why is this happening to me every day? The subconscious prompter was like, why is this happening to me? All my friends are focusing on their careers. They're creating families. They're going out, having fun. They're worried about what Bayern Munich is doing this weekend, what this celebrity does on social media. And my entire mind is consumed with these health issues. And it was, why me, why me, why me? Just to find out later on in time, actually, that it was divine intervention. And the answer I got to the why me was simply because it allows you to tap into your otherwise unrealized potential by mobilizing the tools and the assets that were passed on to me through my heroic past. And that completely changed my outlook on reality, because it changed from why me to it's an opportunity for me to honor my past. And by doing so, unlocking my heroic potential within, because potential remains untapped if you don't face hardship. Why? Because you stay in the known. In order for you to extract potential within, you need to face difficult situations that you haven't felt and dealt with before. And by doing so, you level up. So it almost became an embracing of hardship and almost like a voluntary seeking of difficult things to do, things that I've been avoiding and things that I've been afraid of. So it did change my lens entirely. For you to give up this sense of victimhood, you actually need to change your beliefs. Because I was thinking when that was happening to me, is like, I'm doomed. Life is set up to take me out. Everyone else is luckier than me. This is it's just not happening. And it was carrying on over time. It wasn't getting better. So like, this is it. Life just made it difficult for me, and that's it. So this is a belief that had to be reflected outwardly. Why? Because the Hermetic law number 1 is that the universe is mental. And the law number 2 is the law of correspondence. As within, so without, as above, so below. So whatever you believe to be true needs to be reflected in outer reality. And so as long as I was thinking that life is set up to take me out, it had to be reflected outwardly. So what I actually had to do is change that belief. And anyone who's ever tried changing a belief knows how difficult it is, because the beliefs are fundamentally our operating system. And beliefs are essentially truths, and I'm putting them in quotes because they aren't truth. These are ideas that are masqueraded as truths because we, based on our upbringing, have encountered specific situations repeatedly. And in order for us to make sense of these situations, we gave them a mask of truth so that we can operate on a day-to-day level and make sense of things. So in order to rewrite beliefs, there is different strategies and ways to do it, which leads me to the second point of how to avoid being stuck at rock bottom, which is you need to change your belief, and you have to rewrite the beliefs, the misaligned beliefs with the beliefs that your ideal self wants to hold. Your ideal self is a healthy gentleman or a woman. You cannot hold the belief that life is out there to get you. It's misaligned, right? So you have to rewrite those beliefs. But the more fundamental the belief is, the more difficult it is to rewrite. So the 4 hallmarks of changing your beliefs are: 1, repetition. The 2nd, listening to information from authorities or experts. The 3rd is emotional load. And the 4th, giving yourself enough reasons to believe the new belief. And I'll go through every one of them, because in the whole reality creation domain, I have never heard anyone speaking about how to change beliefs. Everyone says you should believe that, but actually telling someone to believe something typically just creates the opposite, because the first thing is like you want to hold on to your belief and you have a defense mechanism. So in order for us to change beliefs, we need to be around the new information on a repetitive level. So the first thing that I started doing was listening to information that was aligned with what I want to believe. So what do I want to believe? I want to believe that it's possible to change my health condition. I want to believe that life is out there to benefit me. So really what I was doing is, both as a prompter internally, I would repeat those new beliefs, just repeat them over and over. I would listen to people and friends and people online that were aligned with that belief. So I would just increase the volume of that information coming in. The second point is, we're much more likely to accept beliefs when they come from experts or authorities. A very recent example is during COVID, Anthony Fauci would come in front of the camera and tell everyone, COVID's going to take everyone out. We have to put on masks. We have to freaking get vaccinated 5, 6 times. And that message came from someone that people respected in that field. So every time you respect someone or you look up to someone as being credible, you're much more likely to accept that information. So what I then started doing in my case was I started listening to audiobooks, to podcasts, Jordan Peterson, Joe Dispenza, Dr. Alan Langer, and I would listen to them on repeat. Why? Because as I said, the first one, the more you repeat something, the more you're likely you are to believe it. And the second thing is, the more credibility you associate with someone, the more likely you are to accept that information. The third point is emotional load. And I'll give you a negative counterexample first, because when people experience an event that is heavily negatively emotionally loaded, they develop post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, from a single event. And that's because the scenario that they're confronted with is associated with a high level of emotional intensity. So your operating system is going to save that as truth, as a fundamental belief. So the more emotional load, and you also see this in advertisements, by the way, they're always emotionally loaded, whether it's fear, whether it's anger, whether it's love. Why? Because they get more quickly to your subconscious mind, and obviously use the repetition as well. So the way that you can use emotional load to change your beliefs is putting yourself first in a neutral emotional state, calming yourself down. What I use is meditation. 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Once I'm at peace and I am neutral, I then evoke a scenario that essentially demonstrates that belief to be true. So for example, someone telling me, oh man, I'm so glad that you're healthy. I'm so glad that you don't have that issue anymore. And it's typically someone I use is someone from my family, because I can envision myself. I can envision their face, the glow in their eyes while they say it, the smile, the voice. You want to envision it as vividly as possible. When I say as vividly as possible, you want to integrate your 5 senses in imagination as much as possible. You want to feel their palm, their handshake. You want to hear their tone. You might even want to smell their perfume, because it evokes a sense of reality. And your subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between this and what you experience emotionally loaded in imagination. And the fourth point is reasoning. And that's something that I haven't heard people speak about a lot. But you have to first understand how beliefs are actually formed on a neurological level. So think about you holding a belief. For example, I have a friend that thinks all women are trash. He hasn't been dating. He wants love, but he believes all women are trash. So every time he's presented with the counter evidence, he immediately blocks it off. It's an amygdala response. It's a fight or flight response. You can think about beliefs the same way you would think about defending yourself in a survival sense. You want to hold on to that belief. So his amygdala is involved. His fight or flight goes up. He gets very much emotionally aroused. The moment you get emotionally aroused, that information gets essentially filtered by the amygdala. But then for you to accept a belief, your prefrontal cortex needs to be involved. And it needs to be involved in updating and reappraising a former belief. But when you're negatively emotionally loaded and you're trying to defend it, what the prefrontal cortex is actually doing is called motivated reasoning. And motivated reasoning is simply finding enough reasons to hold on to your old belief. The other way around, if you are able to remain calm and at peace, you're actually allowing your prefrontal cortex to reappraise information and to possibly recode and update that information. So the first thing you need to understand is that when you're listening to any of that information, in the beginning it might be something like, it makes no sense. I'm going to reject it outwardly. I'm at rock bottom. I'm a victim. So when someone says, no, you aren't, you're in control of your own life, it's your inner state dictating your outer reality, you're like, that's all BS. So you have to be aware of that reaction. Again, that's an amygdala response, a fight or flight, because you want to hold on to that belief. Why? Because a belief allows you to get a grip on reality. So it's foundational. We all have beliefs, but the question is, what belief do you want to save in your operating system? Because that's actually going to predict your reality outwardly. So to sum it up, the way that beliefs are formed is through repetition, through listening to experts with credibility, through emotional load, and finally through finding enough reasons to believe the new belief. And that one is very important. And that one needs your intention to be set out that way. So if all your time you thought that men are X and women are that, or that the world is out there to get you, you now have to be intentional about finding evidence externally through people, situations, and events that affirm the opposite. And it can be as simple as setting out the goal every day to find 3 reasons to affirm your new belief. And the more you go through life intentionally looking for those reasons, the more likely you are to find them. And the more you see them and find them, the more you're going to save that as your operating system. But it needs to stay on the top of your head. You've probably heard about the red car effect. Like if I tell you about, a red car, or you want to buy a red car, all of a sudden you see all the red cars around you. So you have to set out the intention to find that evidence. And when you do that, you will see evidence for that. Point number 3, you have to create data points. Now, a lot of times we can actually look back at our old data points of difficult situations and hardships we faced, just to figure out that years later it was the best thing that happened to us. I know that in my case, whether it was going through green card issues, which at that time was my rock bottom. I wasn't able to stay in the US. I had to go back to Germany, come back, and I was like, man, this is insane. Like, this is the most difficult thing. My life is falling apart. Just to realize it happened for a reason. But it only makes sense in hindsight, right? In that very moment, it's difficult. You want to avoid it. You want to get out of it. But if you can look at those data points of your life and reflect, you can actually shift perspective when you're going through hardship in the present sense and look at it as, yeah, it is difficult, but I also know that everything that I faced in the past was for me to level up and things actually improve because of X, Y, and Z. And I also know that even though this is difficult, 5 years down the line, my life is going to be better because of X, Y, and Z. Now, some people have more personal data points than others. But if you don't have a lot of personal data points because maybe you haven't faced a lot of difficult situations, or maybe you've faced difficult situations and you keep leveling down, Because I know a lot of examples of people that essentially just keep losing hope about life the more they face difficult scenarios. And they literally keep leveling down emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Then you have the ability to create data points in the present. And the way you do it is, one, physically. That's always the easiest way for me. You can create physical data points by doing difficult things physically, whatever that means for you. For someone that might be going to the gym for the first time, for someone that might be running a marathon, for someone that might be fasting for a day, for someone that might be doing a water fast for 7 days, for someone that might be showering cold, for someone that might be a cold plunge. Whatever it is you can do physically that is difficult to you, that stretches your boundaries, it signals to you that you're capable of more than you thought you actually were. And when you actually do that, the result of doing that is building self-trust, which is then a muscle that allows you to find confidence, conviction, and power when you're facing present struggles. The second way to do is to create mental data points. We all have certain fears that we've been avoiding. And once we start exposing ourselves to those fears voluntarily, then we again exercise this muscle of self-trust, and we're building data points. So when you do something such as, maybe you're a guy who wants to date a girl but has a problem approaching girls. If you go maybe talk to a girl, set that out as a goal. Can't do that. Well, how about you look at a girl, just make eye contact. Okay, I can do that. You're exposing yourself to something you're afraid of. What you're actually, and you're doing that voluntarily, what you're actually doing is, again, you're proving to yourself that you can do things that you thought were impossible or difficult. So when you're dealing with rock bottom and hardship, it again allows you to build a muscle that then allows you to look at hardship in a way that increases the probability of you thinking that you can transcend it. And all you have is belief. If you believe that you can, then you can. So creating those data points is simply to increase your self-confidence and your belief that whatever hardship it is you're facing, you can overcome. And the third point is you can actually create data points by proxy. And this is something that I did when I was having my health issues. I literally looked for success stories. I went on Reddit and I looked at people who had tinnitus who cured it. I looked at people who had panic attacks who cured it. I looked at people who had COVID-related neurological symptoms, brain zaps, muscle twitches, crawling sensations, whatever that is, that were able to overcome it. So I created those reference points by proxy, finding examples of people that had the same issue that I have that I think I can't transcend, but they did conquer and transcend. So that sometimes is enough to give you hope and that burst of motivation, that little catalyst to then allow you to go out and create your own data points. And that brings me to the very last point of how you avoid being stuck at rock bottom, and that's having faith. And that's quite frankly the most important one, because as long as you believe you are only this physical vessel of 5 senses, the toolbox remains very limited. But once you wake up to the fact that you are a microcosm of the divine, of the all, of God, of the infinite, you realize that you already have everything within you. And when you have the all within you, by definition of you having that, there isn't anything that can happen to you in the physical world that takes you out. It will allow you to look at hardship in a very different way. It will make you feel divinely protected. It almost gives you an unshakable foundation of conviction, self-trust, and confidence. And maybe some people will say, yeah, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in any of that. I was someone who was very rational. While I was getting my PhD, all I was interested in was data. So it was hard for me to just believe in a God, something that I don't know how, when, and why. I wanted reasons and evidence. And so for me, creating a relationship with the divine was very different. I had to read a lot of scientific papers. One book that comes to mind is Dr. Ellen Langer out of, I believe, Harvard or Stanford. And she wrote this book called Counterclockwise. And in this book, she essentially took a bunch of older gentlemen. They were somewhere in their 70s or 80s. And she took them for a week to a retreat. And that retreat was a retreat where they had to live as if they were young again. So she turned back time. They had to speak as if they were 30, 40 years ago. They had to watch shows from back in the time, and they had to speak in the present tense. And then after that week, she actually took a lot of medical labs, their blood sugar, their heart rate, their muscle mass, their grip strength. And what she found is that all these medical numbers improved merely by those people living as if they were young again. What's also really cool is she took pictures before and after, and then had people objectively evaluate whether that person looks younger here or younger here. And she found a significant statistical relationship between these older people going through this retreat and living as if they were young and actually looking younger. So even visually, they were aging backward. And that really opened my eyes through science to the divine and to realizing what belief and faith actually does. And faith actually, from an etymological standpoint, it comes from the Latin word fides, Fides, which means to trust, but it also means to persuade, and it also means to command. And then you ask yourself, persuade whom and command whom? Persuade yourself and command yourself. Command and persuade yourself with what? Well, when you have faith, you can tell yourself that you are something before the world proves it to you. And that's why Jesus said, do you not realize that Christ Jesus is within you unless you fail the test? And that's a verse that I love because it puts faith to test. So essentially what Jesus was saying is that once you realize that you hold the all within you, you will realize that reality around you will change, but it will change through the realization of who you are and through your ability to rewrite your inner system, your fundamental beliefs, your values, where your attention goes, your perceptions. And so from a divine perspective, hardship is just a lending hand. It's your higher self giving you a hand to pull you closer to a better reality, to your ideal self, to you getting to your goals. But it will depend on whether you're willing to take that hand or look at it as life being set up against you. So that comes down to your own choice.